I am Jim Collison and live from Omaha, Nebraska in the Gallup office in Sydney, Australia. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on June 16th, 2015. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room available for you right below the main video window. If you're listening to the recorded version of this or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can contact us. Just send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or you can use the contact form right there on the live page, and many of you do that. We appreciate when you do it. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs. You can also catch this video and both the streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening. Many of you are doing that as well, and so you're catching that either on the iPhone or Android device in a podcatcher or podcast catcher. And so those are all available for you. All the links to do that are available for you out there at our coaches blog. Head out to coaching.gallup.com. Claire DeCarteret is our host today. She works as a learning and sales manager with Gallup in the Sydney, Australia office. Although today, extra special treat for me, she's here in Omaha. Claire, super excited to have you on the program and great to have you here in Omaha. I know they're missing you in Sydney, but thanks for coming out to Omaha to do Call to Coach.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and good evening to anybody joining us in this hemisphere, and of course good afternoon to you, Jill, in Sydney. And normally I'd be there right with you for this session, but I just so happen to be joining from the US this time. Thank you so much for joining us in the Sydney office, Jill. I'd love to just introduce you before we get started. It's a pleasure to have you, Jill Rowe, on our Call to Coach. This is our Australasia edition, and we run this one once a month. Jill is a Gallup certified strengths coach, having gone through our accelerated strengths coach program in February 2015. Jill's got her own business called First Line Coaching and focuses on three real key areas, which is individual coaching, strengths-based team sessions, and human resources consulting. She's passionate about making a difference in people's lives, the businesses that they work in, and the general community through coaching and learning and development solutions. So welcome to you today, Jill.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. And I'm enjoying your nice office here, actually, which is lovely.
It's not bad, is it? Jill, I wanted to start off by introducing your top five and then just asking you to give us a little bit of information about how you use your top five to be the best person that you can be. So, Jill, you have responsibility, harmony, connectedness, belief, and individualization. Tell me a bit more about who you are and how you get things done through your strengths.
Okay, well, thanks, Claire. Yes, so look, I use them in combination. So I'll start with responsibility and belief, because I think those two are really important for me in combination. When I did the course, you talked about responsibility as being the serving, the serving talent, the drive to serve, were the words you used. And that really resonated with me, because I realised then I'm somebody that always jumps in when I see an opportunity, jump in to help people. I've got a very strong belief system, very strong values, and they guide what I do. And when we were talking about the strengths, I realised that it can also, as much as it can be a strength, if it's overdone, it can also be, sometimes you're not a help, you're a hindrance. So in answering the question, how can I be the best I can be with those, I realised that whilst they're real strengths, I also have to watch them to make sure, for example, that somebody actually wants help when I think they do. So it's really been interesting actually working on those two and looking at them in a slightly different light since the course. So that's two of my top five. The other two that I really like to think about is harmony and individualization. So harmony, as we know, people strong in harmony tend not to like conflict. And I agree with that. That's me. But I think sometimes there's a bit of a myth that when you don't like conflict, that you can't handle conflict and you can't handle conflicting situations or tension. And that's where I think that with harmony, and if you combine it with individualization, which is that real seeing the qualities in people, what I get from that is that we just approach conflict from a very collaborative point of view. So for me, that means really taking into account different people's perspectives. As a senior HR professional, I've been in many situations where I've had to mediate between people with different viewpoints. And approaching it from a collaborative point of view means that you actually help people see in a nice, calm way the different perspectives, which means at the end of the day, it's not just simply about compromise. It's not simply about somebody giving up on their position. It's actually about collaboratively working towards a really good solution to whatever it was that caused the conflict in the first place. So that's something that I'm really pleased to have as a strength because of the professions that I've chosen to be in. Connectedness is my other one. That's an interesting one. I think I'm still working on that. I've always wanted to understand the bigger picture, and I'm thinking that's where my connectedness comes in. And I've never been able to just be given something, given a small amount of detail and run with it. I always seem to need to know a lot more. So I think that's the connectedness. How does everything connect?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting what you said about harmony, because I think that is a misconception with harmony, that people with high harmony step away from the conflict and back out of it. But what I've noticed, exactly to your point, is that actually sometimes those people step right into it and they help to bring consensus. So I think about that, especially with your individualization, you know, understanding the uniqueness of both situations and then enabling that consensus is a big advantage of someone with high harmony. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Jill, you mentioned that, you know, the professions that you've chosen to work in and a senior HR background. Tell us a little bit about your strengths journey and how you came to uncover strengths and really live by it through your work.
Yes, well, I first came across the whole concept of strengths 20 years ago. So at that stage, I'd already been working in HR and L&D roles, learning and development roles for 10 years. And I had an opportunity to write the HR programs for a Bachelor of Business in Hospitality and Tourism. And so naturally, I was looking at all the academic journals, making sure I had empirical evidence for whatever I was presenting to the undergrad students. And in reading the best practice, I came across some literature that was simply about maximising one's strengths and minimising one's weaknesses. And it really resonated with me. It was one of those moments when I sort of thought, this is like a missing piece of the jigsaw.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me as an HR professional and a learning and development professional, I had always believed that my role was to create environments within organisations where employees could really flourish, where they could really thrive and be creative and be the best they could be to really deliver the results to their organisation. So I'd been focusing on things like values. I've been focusing on what were their motivators, trying to bring in policies and programs that would create a really good, positive environment. But adding the element of strengths really was a big aha moment for me, because when I thought about it, I realised that when we are performing, or we're performing a role where we're utilising our strengths, I think we are our most comfortable.
Yeah.
I think and from comfort comes, when you're comfortable and you're confident, then you're more creative. I think you take more calculated risks, perhaps. These are all things that I've just observed. So that was really my journey, and that was 20 years ago. And since then, I've gone on and I've started up a couple more HR functions for organisations, and I've really built that strengths-based philosophy into everything I've done since then.
Yeah, and so when you came across this, how did you then discover? So in that article that you read, was it a Gallup article? Did you come across the Clifton StrengthsFinder instrument at that time, or were you just connecting with the concept of using a strengths-based approach?
No, it wasn't a Gallup article. It was just philosophically about strengths.
Yeah.
And I didn't come across the Clifton StrengthsFinder for probably another few years after that.
Yeah.
And of course, I've come across other things that have other strengths tools as well. I decided to go with the Clifton StrengthsFinder recently because, as you know, we've now got all the wonderful programs that you run here so that we can actually be a certified Gallup Strengths coach. I love the language of the StrengthsFinder. I find it really good for the corporate world.
Yeah.
People can really relate to it, and people in all walks of life, but also from the most inexperienced junior employee through to the most senior executive. I think they can relate to the language of the 34 themes, talent themes. So yes, so that's sort of, I guess, my journey with Clifton StrengthsFinder has only probably been in the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah.
I love what you said about the language and how, having that common language and being so applicable to the workplace. It really is such a democratic instrument, really, doesn't it? Because, like you said, it spans from the individual contributor right up to the senior leader. So that's what I love. I'm glad you picked that up as well. So tell us about how you're weaving strengths into the current work that you do with first line coaching.
Well, I've got 3 quite distinct areas that I'm focusing on.
Yeah.
And so I'll talk first of all about the team coaching, because I really love that. Well, I love all 3, but the team coaching, I guess, has a lot of impact in a short amount of time. So what we do there is I'll work with a team, and before we get together, they go on and use the Clifton StrengthsFinder, the online tool, and they discover their strengths. So some choose to go with their top 5, others choose to leap straight into the full 34. When they arrive, they've already got whichever one of those the company's chosen to go with, the 5 or the 34, and they've read their reports and they've started to reflect and think about their strengths. When we get into the workshops, we actually talk about, we learn a bit more about the strengths. So I might look to see if there's some common ones that are in there. I might look at the leader and see, has the leader got something unique that they can share. I'll look for somebody that does have, anybody in the team that's got something unique that might make a unique contribution. And we'll spend time discussing those. And the idea is that, first of all, I want as individuals them to really start to understand themselves from a strengths-based perspective. Then we move from there to understanding each other and how we each work best. That's where I'll use the tool The Best of Us, which some of you you would know, obviously, Claire, with that one. And then we look at complementary partnering. So how can different people work together? So I think this is really excellent for, say, project teams. You often bring people in for a short period of time. They need to make maximum impact. They need to get results quite quickly. Knowing how best to work with each other, I think, is really a powerful tool. Committees, that's another one that, I think it has a lot of merit there. And really any team, but particularly teams that might have a few new people, maybe a new leader, getting used to how they work. So that's the team base. I don't know if you've got any questions about that before I move on to the other 2 areas that that I work with.
Oh, no, I think that's great. I think you get such a huge impact in working with teams like that, and you can bring those perspectives to light for everybody. So understanding themselves, but how that actually lands in the context of their teammates. So, yeah, that's brilliant. I love that you're focusing on that team element. But I know you do individual coaching as well. So what kind of approach would you take in that regard?
So I'm doing a lot of individual coaching, as you know, and at the moment, one of the most exciting things I'm working on is a very good business partner of mine created a wonderful leadership program for young and new and inexperienced leaders within the mental health sector. And this is a bit of a pilot program, but there's 3 components to the program, and the one that I'm looking after for her is actually the individual coaching. So each of those leaders is receiving 8 sessions of coaching over an 8-month period. And with them, I'm personally taking a very strengths-based approach. Now, what we're doing is we're really sort of looking at most of them. They're wonderful people. They're doing fantastic work, and they have wonderful people reporting to them who work with consumers in the mental health area.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, many of them, they're actually quite nervous about leading.
Okay.
And that's normal when we're new in a role. I'm using strengths to help them really build their confidence. And I can see the qualities in each of them, and I can see that they're all doing a great job. But what's holding them back in a lot of respects from being really excellent is their own self-belief, their own confidence issues. And that's where I think strengths is really, really good. So I've been working with them, but in addition to them, I've also done some one-off coaching sessions, debriefing people on their Strengths Finder. And that's been really interesting as well, because I didn't think that you could really get much from a single session. And people have asked me for a debrief on a single session, and I have said to them, look, I can do this, but I don't think you'll get much from it. But I've been really interested at how many have had just a single light bulb or aha moment, gone away, reflected, and have fed back to me weeks later that they're still working on that, they're still thinking about it, and it's still having impact. So it's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. And going back to what you were saying about the new and inexperienced leaders in the mental health sector, I find that really interesting because, you know, we often talk about strengths around that self-discovery and that self-regulation, but also that resilience building. So how have you found that to be really effective in that particular sector?
Well, I need to say it is still fairly early days in this program, although I have been coaching I've been coaching in this area for about 6 to 8 months, and so it's still new.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding is that it comes back to this confidence piece.
Mm-hmm.
When anybody, forget, it doesn't have to necessarily be those particular clients, when any of us are feeling a little bit uncertain about something, when our confidence is a little bit down, then depending on our mindset, whether we tend to see the glass half empty or glass half full, I think that we can really undervalue ourselves and really perhaps, well, at the end of the day, not perform at our best.
Yeah.
So in terms of building resilience, one of the things I do is we're doing 2 things at once. First of all, we're actually looking at what they do really strongly, and we really reflect on that. We really pick apart their top strengths and really get them to tell stories about how they're using them, and focus on those and focus on how you can make yourself better using those strengths. So I find that you can build confidence by getting people to actually articulate situations where they know and they can't dispute the fact that they've done well. We can reinforce and reaffirm what they're doing well. And then at the same time, we also look and I question them about the areas that might be causing them a lack of confidence. And we build resilience through then looking at strategies. And those strategies can come from their current strengths. Yeah. So as you know, there's the 4 domains, and somebody might initially think, oh, I've got no strategic thinking, or I've got no influencing, therefore I can't do those things. But as we all know, you can. You just have to look at it a different way. You have to look at what strengths you have and build on those. Use them. Turn the gas up, which is one of the lovely analogies that both you and Robin used when I went through the accelerated course. I loved that analogy that you just draw on. Well, you can draw on even your lesser talents if you need to. Yeah. Turn the gas up and achieve what you need to achieve.
Yeah.
So did that answer the question?
Yeah, it definitely did. And I asked that specific question because I think it's a really wonderful complement to that particular industry sector that we haven't really talked a lot about, especially on Call to Coach before. So it'll be interesting to keep in touch with you and see how that evolves, as I know it's early days, but as you do more work in that sector, because I think there's a lot of opportunity with strengths-based development around, mental health and building resilience. And, you're absolutely right when it comes back to those self-limiting beliefs. The Strengths Finder is a great instrument to help really turn the dial on some of those and repair them. Yeah. So
can I just make one other comment there about that? And that is, I think this is a really important one as well, and that is that when you're working with new leaders, it's often the very first time they've had to think for more than just themselves. Yeah. So when they were in a single role, even though they might have been a team player, their accountability was all about them. When they move into a managerial or leadership role, all of a sudden the accountability is much greater. I'm suddenly accountable for the results of a whole team, and I'm accountable for a whole load of people to do their job. And of course, they're new in the role, so they're wanting to prove to whoever promoted them that they've chosen the right person. So there's quite a lot of pressure that we forget exists in those sorts of roles. And where I think some people in those roles make the mistakes initially is when they actually start to look at the performance of others who report to them, they sometimes see performance that maybe they don't think is great, and hey, maybe it isn't great. So they then go about trying to change the direct reports to do things the way that the manager, do them, because that's been their successful formula. Yes. That's made them the great person that got the promotion. What I find with strengths is that I've been chatting to my leaders about the fact that we each use our strengths differently, and you can have a team of 5 people and each of them will achieve the same results perhaps, but by doing it 5 different ways depending on their top strengths. And that's a really big lesson for the leaders to learn, and those that have worked with me and got that message and found that it's really resonated with them have given me feedback that's made them sit back and actually look at their direct reports in a different light. And it's really helped them because they've then in turn tried to develop the strengths in their people rather than try and change their people to be something they're not and be little clones of themselves.
Yeah, and it's such a huge shift because conventional management is really managing to tactics, managing to tasks. You're in 5 and looking over your shoulder at what you're doing to get the job done, and a lot of people still manage that way, and organisations are taking a shift now, especially when workforces are becoming more mobile and people are working more remotely. it's rather than managing to the tactics, it's managing to the outcomes, and defining the outcomes let people find their own way of getting there. And that's the shift that I think you're talking about there. So it is an aha moment for a lot of people, and helping them think about management differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Jill, I know you've been doing a lot of team-based strengths work as well lately. Where is some of the, tell us about some of the ways that you've seen strengths really have an impact in a team session.
Yes, well, I can give you a couple of examples that really stand out in my mind. One I'll actually talk about was one that I didn't even run the workshop. It was actually one a few years ago when somebody else introduced strengths to an organisation, and I was working in. They used the Clifton Strengths Finder. They bought everybody in a sales team the book, and they all went on and got their top 5. And it was a team that had a lot of people that had been there many years, a sales team, and then a lot of new people had come in, and the managers were trying to get the team to really bond as a team. And I remember, I was the HR director at the time, and I remember that I had so many phone calls from the various members of the team in the days and weeks following. And with everybody, they'd say, this is fantastic, you have to roll this out through the whole company. And so with every one of them, I said to them, well, you have to tell me specifically what it was that was so good. And the really key message that I got was that it was that piece about understanding each other and increasing their tolerance, which was really interesting. So I think that we tend to gravitate towards people that we have something in common with, or that we just like something about the person. And if you have two people that are very different, sometimes they actually end up inadvertently irritating each other, and when they do that, they tend to then avoid each other. But as we both know, they can bring a real richness to the team if they work together. I mean, their ideas collaboratively can create the best solution. So I think if we understand that how that person works and why they work that way, that's the value in it. So that was definitely, that team absolutely benefited, and they talked about it forever after. It wasn't just we go have a great day and then forget about it after that. I also had one of my own experiences recently, which was a really, which was a good one, where I didn't know about it at the time, but I got feedback later from a couple of individuals after a team building workshop. So this was a team, they're a great team, they loved working together, and very high performing team by any standards. But there had been two people whose skills and knowledge complemented each other, and they really should have worked together on a lot of projects. One, however, was very high in sort of executing talents, happened to be a very high activator, had another one that had some strategic thinking, so analytical, had ideation, also deliberative. And interestingly, what was happening was that when they had to work together, one of them was throwing out almost instructions, sort of clicking the fingers, make it happen, sort of, and the other one was a bit overwhelmed, and so was not responding at the time. If she was given a week to do something, she delivered at the very 11th hour, and there was this complete disconnect. Once they actually understood each other, they realised that one was just a make-it-happen, quick thinker, quite, very responsive. The other person needed the full week that she was given, because she'd go and get data, and she'd analyse and analyse and think things through, and do a full risk assessment on everything. And the two together were a great combination, but there was fireworks when they were put in the same room. So what they did, by understanding how each other worked, they agreed how to work together. So the activator was then going and saying to the person, this is what I need, here's some ideas, you go away, you work with it, and then we'll have a meeting when you've had time to do what you do best.
Mm-hmm.
And they're working really fabulously well together now, I've heard. So that's a bit of a success story, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm hearing there through both of those stories that you shared is not only an appreciation for self, but a real appreciation for others, and that common theme is helping people to work more collaboratively together because they're breaking down some of the misconceptions about each other's work style. I think that's really an important takeaway. Definitely. So once you actually do these strength sessions within an organisation, or even before, Jill, tell us about what your approach would be to embedding strengths in the culture.
Yeah. Oh, look, that's a really good question, Claire. And I think, well, first of all, you probably have to do it differently depending on what culture already existed in the organisation. The ones that I've been working with have already had an environment where the concept of strength is not necessarily new to them, or they're very what I'd call progressive organisations, in that they already have a great deal of respect, mutual respect for each other. They their values, the values of the organisation, they're not incredibly internally competitive or political organisations. So like every organisation has its politics, but what I mean is that they realise that there's enough competition outside the organisation. So you don't want competition in the organisation that's destructive or unhealthy. A bit of friendly rivalry is one thing, but I think that's the thing. You need to get to a point where there's an understanding that the competition is out there, and any competition within the organisation needs to be, as I said, healthy, friendly rivalry. So then it's about, I think, always starting at the top and getting commitment from the most senior people, bringing them on board, and then working your way through where you get to a point. I think the ideal would be where it's not just that we understand strengths within our individual teams, but that it's also further afield, so that we actually see ourselves through a wider lens, that it's not just the little team, mini team we're in, but that we start to work inter-team. And to do that, I think that means actually understanding the strengths of other teams within the organisation as well. But I think that takes a while, and it evolves over time. But I think it requires a real commitment from the top. It needs to break down also a few things like the traditional approach to training and development, the traditional approach to development plans. The traditional approach, of course, was we look at a job description, we put a person against a job description and we go tick, 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 you can do those things. Great. Then we look and say, oh, there's a gap. Let's send you on a training course. And then that didn't work. Let's send you on another training course. And I think what we need to do is take a different approach. I've got a story of one that you might be interested in recently, where I actually had somebody that came and pleaded with me to suggest to their manager that they actually approach an aspect of their job differently. Shall I tell you about this one?
Oh, please. Yeah, that sounds juicy. We'd like to know about that one.
So we were talking, this was in a team workshop, and so we were doing a bit of an exercise, a little bit like the exercise, what am I paid to do?
Yeah.
And we had somebody who, all strategic thinking, the top 5 were all in strategic thinking.
Okay.
And any relationship building work, I'm not even sure if they were in the dominant. I think they were somewhere down in lesser themes. And this person was a very strong analyst and a real go-to person for the team. Whenever they needed to present data outside of the team, they asked him to put together the presentation and present it. And he said to me it was his worst nightmare. And in fact, he said to me, I actually lose productivity for a whole week before the presentation.
Oh,
I've been
wow.
on every presentation training course there is, and he said, it makes no difference. I get so nervous, I can hardly think. I spend a week rehearsing, and I still don't deliver a terribly good presentation at the time. And he said to me, but I've been listening to you and I've been thinking that my boss loves presentations. He loves the limelight. He has to know what I have to present anyway. By the time I'm standing up there presenting, he needs to know. So he said, I'd like to suggest that we actually complement each other. I'll do the analysis. I'll do all the I'll put the presentation together, walk him through it. I'll sit there in the front row so that I'm there as a resource, but I don't actually want to do this presentation. And we could see that was put to the manager, and I think he was still, I think it'll take him a while to come round,
Yeah.
but certainly I think that's a good solution. You know, we're not talking about a young graduate where you might say as a developmental exercise, why don't you give a few more presentations a go and see how it is. We're talking about a seasoned professional that's tried it and basically is bashing his head against a brick wall with presenting. So I don't remember which question you asked me that I answered that for.
Do you know, I think that's a great story, Jill, because it goes back to one of the questions in the Gallup Q12, which is, at work I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. And, you know, strengths feeds right into that question. But when you do something that's not your sweet spot or not what you do best, like you said earlier, you know, when you're feeling less confident, you're not as creative, you're not as productive. So that was like a confidence zapper for this fellow, and it sounds like a great solution. But what we were talking about was how your approach to embedding strengths in an organisation, I think some of your key takeaways, just to repeat those, was getting the commitment from the leaders, making sure that the teams appreciated themselves as a team, but also each other. So there was that inter-team collaboration as well. And then supporting it with structure like training and development plans. And you were talking about the example of, you know, sending someone on a training course of an area that's not their strength, and it's not going to be their strength. So yeah, I think they're all great examples. And thinking a little bit about, you know, switching gears now. So what does a typical individual coaching session look like for you, and what's your approach to that one-on-one strengths coaching? Because we've talked a lot about the teams.
Yeah. So if somebody really does want to have just one coaching session to debrief, they've gone on and done the Strengths Finder and they've read the report, a lot of the time I find I have to spend quite a bit of time actually talking about the philosophy of strengths. So that wouldn't be what I'd call my normal typical coaching session, because I find that a lot of the time I end up doing a lot more talking than I think I should, and you know, we're really sort of talking around things like talking around the potential weaknesses of some of the strengths, because of course that's really important. Talking about, as I mentioned before, turning the gas up or down on your strengths to moderate it as you need it for the situation. So it would be really getting them to honour their differences. It's honour their unique qualities. It's interesting how sometimes people really surprise me that they've got it fixated in their mind that because they didn't have strategic thinking, that's a problem, or because I've had people that have been high on empathy and seem to think in the corporate world, does empathy have a place? Well, absolutely it does. So sometimes it's about actually allowing people to just talk about how they might use those strengths to help them value their own strengths. And so that would be if they're just doing an individual one-off. I prefer to have at least 4 sessions. The 8 sessions that we've got with the leaders in this program in the mental health sector, I think is ideal, because then we can actually really look at how we can use it. We can look at where they want to go next in their lives, in their professional lives. We can look at what behavioural change might be necessary to make them more effective as a leader or whatever it is they're wanting to do in their life. And then it takes a while sometimes to work out how to actually use your strengths to be more effective, because a lot of the time I don't even think we really realise what our strengths are until there's something like the Strength Finder or another similar tool that actually presents it to us in a language that we go, okay, that makes sense. And then I think that's when the real learning begins. You reflect, think about how you use it, and think about its potential weaknesses. Learn to see those triggers and draw it back. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were doing some work within an organisation, what would be an ideal map in terms of a team session and individual coaching? Do you have a standard approach for that?
I have what I think would be ideal, but of course you're always working with organisations who might say they've got budgetary constraints, or they might say they have time constraints. Everybody nowadays they want to achieve the absolute maximum in the minimum amount of time possible. So I guess I'm still experimenting a bit with that. I think the ideal is to actually spend some quality time with the most senior manager or leader of the team first, really understand what the team's objective is, really have a strong purpose that they can all the members of the team are working towards. I love to always talk about how it fits into the bigger picture. That's my big picture coming through. I don't like to think of just a team. I like to think, how do they impact on the organisation, and then the organisation, how it's impacting on the broader community or the industry in which they reside. So once you've got all of that bedded down, then I think it's a matter of going in and starting that process as I described before with the strengths workshop. And then I like to do follow-ups, and at the moment I'm setting the follow-ups about 2 months down the track, and we're working towards now having specific goals and objectives that the team has to achieve, and almost in the workshops using it as a planning opportunity to say, well, this is what we have to do. So the exercise that we might do as individuals, where is it, what am I paid to do? Then becomes the group activity. What is the group needing to achieve? How are we going to achieve it, given the skills, the knowledge, and the strengths that we have within the team?
Yeah, I think that is really key, is that integration with the work goals. So it's not a side activity all about the strengths. It's, okay, so how do we use what we've got to get these goals done, the things that we need to get done for our role? I think that's, speaking back to how we embed this, that's a great example of how you embed it, is weave it into what they're already charged with doing. Jill, a couple more questions, because we're having some great conversation, but I'm just conscious of time. I know you're a parent as well, a mother of 2. How have you used strengths in your parenting?
Yes, so I have 2. I have a 22-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter. Look, I've always had, we raised our children to be very independent thinkers from very young. We always wanted them to make decisions for themselves within, the boundaries of their age, sort of thing, from very young. So strengths just fitted nicely into that, because our 2 are chalk and cheese. They're 2 very different people, so we had to be really conscious of that. Recently, though, my 19-year-old, she has really embraced, she did the Strengths Finder. her top strength is futuristic.
Oh, yeah.
And she's really embraced it, and she's done a couple of things recently which I could see. She intentionally, she said, Mum, this is my futuristic coming through. And one of them
Nice.
actually only just last week, when she was sitting, she had to sit 3 consecutive university exams in 3 consecutive days.
Oh, wow.
And she was finding it a bit overwhelming. And she was sitting there studying, and she said to me, I'm using my futuristic, Mum. She said, I want to, because she wants to go and do an exchange in England next year, and they've got to get good results to be eligible. And she sat there and she said, I hate sitting thinking about today, but she said, I've got a vision. I've used my futuristic. I'm visualising myself in the UK next year. And so that's keeping me focused today, because I know that I have to do well today to get to where I want to get next year. So that's a really good example of a 19-year-old who's, intentionally and purposefully thinking about her strengths.
That's a great, and I love how she used the language. I'm using my futuristic, Mum. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah. Jill, you went through the Accelerated Strengths Coach program in our Sydney February cohort. Just tell me a little bit about the experience for you and what was some of the key takeaways from the program.
Oh, look, it truly was a wonderful experience in so many ways. Thank you to you, Claire, and to Robin Riley from the New Zealand office, who were the facilitators for the week. Absolutely fantastic, and just so much knowledge to share, which was great. We're also very lucky that all the people on the program were really energetic, really enthusiastic about it, and were willing to share their experiences. So we had a really lovely group. We had Anne, of course, from your office as well as one of our participants, and with a lot of knowledge as well. I found it very energising. The things that I took away from it in particular, there were a few things that I just liked the language that you used. I liked things like the fact that you used language like the gas burner that you turn up and down. I'd never thought about it that way before, and I've continued to use that language with clients since, and they really get that. They really like that. The resources that were made available to us, fantastic. The support since the program in terms of tools, called to coach like today, all of these things really, it's a real privilege, I think, to be part of an organisation like this, when you feel you're made to feel like one of the family, which I think is really important. There would have been many things that I took from it, but I guess that's my main takeaway from it at the moment.
That's great feedback. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jill. How would someone go about finding you if they wanted to look you up and do a team session or speak to you about some individual coaching? How could we get in touch with you?
Well, I can give you, I'm on LinkedIn, Jill Rowe, or there's a website, or I can give you an email address. Shall I give you an email address?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep, absolutely.
So, Jill, at firstlinecoaching.com.au.
Wonderful. And is that also the name of your website, Jill? First Line Coaching?
Yes, so the website is www.firstlinecoaching.com.au.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jill. Jim, I know you had a special question you wanted to ask Jill.
Yeah, I'm actually fault to the chat room. During the show, we started gathering a crowd, and so we've actually got quite a few out there. But Warwick, who's there in Sydney, wanted to ask Jill, what was the single most light bulb moment for you in understanding your own strengths? When was that moment it kind of made sense to you, and you thought, I've got to continue with this?
Well, the whole concept of strengths, I'd say the 20 years ago, which I referred to, but I did have a very big light bulb moment when I was doing the accelerated program in February this year around my strength of responsibility, because it was really understanding its weakness and understanding when it was put to us that responsibility is that drive to serve. Those three little words really resonated with me and actually allowed me to see it in a completely different way. And I'd never thought about it, but that is absolutely me. But I hadn't actually identified that until Robin and Claire were talking about it actually in the training room.
Yeah, that's great. That's one of those things that happens. You've been in this environment a long time. And even when we do Theme Thursdays, there are moments when I catch on and I'm like, I've been doing this for a long time and I'm still seeing that. So I guess I encourage people, don't ever give up on the learning process of it. And for you, you've been doing this a long time as well, and you have an aha moment, early, just not too long ago, back in February. So I encourage people to keep digging in to that as well. Let me ask you one more quick question. Any differences that you see? Certainly, you probably have a global bent to what you've been doing around HR. Any differences you see when we think about StrengthsFinder in Australia specifically, some challenges that may, because of the culture, that may be different there than, say, in the U.S. or in, north of you guys in Asia?
Look, I can probably best speak about Australia, and I still think that we're a little bit traditional in our HR thinking. So the whole traditional thinking of still having a very strict position description and adhering to it strictly. I've even seen people that are good performance managed about one or two small things that they just can't seem to get their head around. And personally, as an HR director, my approach would have been, let's see if we can actually complementary partner them with somebody else, because otherwise they're doing a fantastic job. I still think that we need to move our thinking from the traditional sort of job description to more about what can this wonderful group of people that we've got offer the organisation, and really give them the freedom to express themselves the best they can, but within some much broader constraints. So I think, in summary, I think our boundaries are a little bit still tight, and we need to move those boundaries out and give people a bit more freedom within certain constraints, and where they have a really clear purpose, clear expectations. I agree with all of that, but then a real freedom to express oneself. And I think the organisations that do that are the more successful organisations that I've observed.
No, that's some great insight. You know what I find, because we do these in India and Singapore, Australia, U.S., London, I've done German shows. We do find each one of those cultures have different, there's still little edgy things with each one. And so for me, it's great to just be a part of those and see how that, to see how StrengthsFinder really deals with that, or has a solution for that, or is able to work in that area. So Jill, thanks for sharing that. Claire, let me throw it back to you as we just kind of wrap it up, and then I've got a few comments at the end.
Absolutely. Well, just wanted to thank you, Jill, so much for your generosity and being available today. I think it's been some really great discussion. I wanted to keep going and keep talking, but we're coming to the end of the hour. So a huge thank you to you, Jill, and I hope that some people will look you up on First Line Coaching. Thanks again for all of your tips on how people can embed this in team environments, in organisations, and it's been a privilege speaking to you today.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you, Jim. It really has been a wonderful opportunity, and really enjoyed the conversation with both of you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I'll remind folks as they look outside the beautiful window there in Sydney, this is the first time we've gotten to see outside the window of Sydney, so thanks for setting that up. Where we could do that a little rainy today, but we know Sydney's beautiful the other 364 days out of the year. Jill, thanks for coming on. We'll remind everyone to take advantage of the resources available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just head to gallupstrengthcenter.com and send us your questions or comments. You can do that in an email, coaching@gallup.com. Like I mentioned before, you can catch the recorded audio and video of this program as well as past ones, and we've got a bunch of them for you. If you're new to this and you want to binge watch, which is real popular to do now with TV shows, you can do that. All those are available on our coaches site, coaching Gallup.com. We now have some 25 global meetups going on around the world, many of them here in the United States, but we've gotten them started in Australia, Singapore, and India as well. Stop over to the meetup page on the coaches blog, again, coaching.gallup.com. If you don't see your city there, maybe you should start one. We'd love to be able to do that. Just contact me with more information. You can send that Jim_Collison@gallup.com. I'd love to help you, give you the details of getting those started. Don't forget, we have Android and iPhone apps available, as well as streaming options if you want to capture the time in the car, on a train, or in a plane to listen to these programs. Many people do. Now you don't have to come live, although we like it when you do, but if you just don't have time to do that, you can get those available on just about any device. Claire, do we have any courses coming up that you wanted to highlight just before we wrap it?
Yeah, we do. Right across the Asia Pacific region, we've got courses. The next one coming up in Sydney is in September, the 7th to the 11th. Between now and then, we've got numerous courses in Singapore, India. We've got Hong Kong in September. If you just go to the Gallup Strength Centre and have a look at the course calendar there's loads of options.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this after the fact, we keep that list up to date all the time. Head over to the Strength Center at GallupStrengthCenter.com. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like we said, we had a chat room kind of gather as the storm kind of brewed as the show went along. We always do these live. Love to have you join us live. Coaching.gallup.com/live, and we look forward to the next call to coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.